Can you say hard hats, folks? Hard hats, lunch pails, steel-toe boots.
Anything short of a championship this year is a failure. Look at this boomer right here.
You've just got so much talent here.
Somebody said we need to apologize for Jaylen.
Can I close it, John? What are we apologizing for? What did we say? What did we do?
Hey, Buddy Manning here. Welcome to the Garden Report, third edition of our postgame show here in Las Vegas. And the Celtics moved to 2-1 alongside as well as Noah Dalzell. Quick postgame show coming your way here as I get out of town. I think Sherrod and Noah are sticking around for a little bit.
Yes, we will be gluttons for punishment. We're sticking around a little while longer.
Yep, and it is only heating up here for the temperature and the Celtics. I liked how their offense looked in this one down the stretch. Double-digit comeback in the second half, led by some unfamiliar faces. Round pick Anton Watson getting a lot more involved in this one, as well as Jaylen House with a couple of big free throws down the stretch of this game. So many different contributors in this game. Jamias Ramsey continues to be an intriguing piece for this team. And these guys all got a lot more shine, Sherrod, because Neemias Queta looks like he's sitting down for the rest of Summer League after two dominant performances. Jaden Springer stayed on the bench for this one. And Drew Peterson joined. Three Celtics now out of Summer League as we get a look at some of the more unsung pieces on the roster here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what you want if you're the Celtics right now. You had an idea of what you wanted from Queta, from Peterson, from Springer, and you've seen that. In fact, I think in many respects they probably exceeded what you thought they could do at this point, but they're NBA players. This is Summer League. You should be the best players on the floor, and they showed that in different stretches. But your point earlier about Jaylen and about Watson, both of those guys are still in this discovery phase of figuring out, what can I do not to be a great NBA player? What can I do to be an NBA player, period? And I thought this was another step in the right direction for both of those guys, the way they were able to perform.
Well, I'm going with Watson first here, Noah. This is what we want to see, right? 9 threes, him being aggressive from outside. He ends up hitting a baseline jumper, too, to give the Celtics a tie game at 77-77. That was a big shot. He had big shots throughout this game, especially in that second half. And as DJ McCoy said after the game, he's NBA ready on defense. It's other stuff they're looking at right now. And he followed it up by saying, I feel good in any position they put him in. He started next to Killian Tilly, so this is a little bit more of a look at him at the 4, which I've been looking forward to because we've mostly just seen him playing not shooting many threes. I think he only took 2 going into this one, I want to say. And tonight he takes 9, and this is exactly what the Celtics want to see from him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just being NBA ready, coming out of, as a 55th pick, was that what he was? That's a really good bar. It's a really good place to start. And so obviously with him, the offense is kind of a little bit more of a question mark. But within this system, if he can consistently knock down shots or at least be he'll find a place in the league, whether in Boston or somewhere else. And so I thought DJ McClay saying post-game, like, he's already an NBA-level defender. And that's kind of what we're seeing right now. I mean, granted, it's Summer League, so there's still a little bit of a jump that will come if he plays real NBA minutes. But I thought he's looked good so far through the 3 games. And I'd imagine he's someone that kind of plays the Summer League through, so we'll get a couple more glances at him.
Yeah, definitely. And he was the guy I was most excited to see because, as we've talked about, Sherrod, certainly in Queta's case, maybe in his case, if you see some growth, if you see some positions he can succeed in, certainly if there's injuries or something that comes up during the year, I don't rule out seeing this guy on the Pro Celtics year 1.
No. And really, the way the Celtics are constructed as a team, you can afford in very short bursts to have him on the floor with other guys who can score because there isn't this weight of expectations that he's coming into this league, into this team with. Let's see what we can do to develop you. And if we have to throw you to the wolves earlier, we know that there's one side of the ball where you can kind of hold your own. And the offense, I don't think they're overly concerned about that because, again, the way your roster is constructed, you don't need him to be a scorer, but you want him to be someone whose shot making is at least an option. It's something that teams at least are going to respect. You don't want a situation where he gets in his defender season, he takes 3 steps back. You don't want to see that. And so I think for him, it's just continue to just keep jacking up shots, which is weird to say because the Celtics have been accused of doing too much of that. But this is a guy that they absolutely need him to be more comfortable shooting the ball because he didn't really do much of that in college.
Yep, and as we suspected, no more Springer here. He showed out enough in that first game, I guess, to make them there. Kata, as we said, wasn't great in the first game, especially finishing. Turned it around a big way in the second one. And then Peterson, I actually thought we might see a little bit more of him, but he's done as well after that 4 for 8 3-point shooting performance here. So clearly the Celtics had seen enough from those guys.
Yeah, and maybe we see Peterson again for game 4 and Davidson sits out. I don't know. They're going to want some experience, I think, on the roster, so that's a possibility. I don't know if the precedent is normally completely shut down for the rest of the way, but probably saw the last of Davidson as well. I would guess. But even down the stretch, I think what's funny about Summer League is like they were resting some of the guys that maybe you would have expected to have out there. But I think in general, like Springer probably didn't even. I wouldn't have guessed that he was going to be on this roster. Like I feel like he has enough NBA, G League, Summer League experience to just have foregone this step. So I think the fact that he was here and just practicing with the team is a good thing. It's good that he's getting those reps and that he's kind of bought in and that they're having him ready and improve. But he was not one of the objectives of this group. And so I think seeing guys like Baylor Scheierman, who I think had good moments today, I don't think he had his best game. Shot was kind of off for most of the night, but he just shows moments where you're like, this is going to be a good NBA player. And so I think you got a little bit of that. But I like when like the guys that you already know are not really fighting for spots here kind of trickle out, because it opens the door for the people that actually are competing for roster minutes or opportunities somewhere in the league.
Yeah, and of course you don't want to see any of those guys get hurt. Right. What do you think of Scheierman 3 games in, Sherrod?
I like what I see, but I love more than anything else, not so much the shot making, but just the feel he has for the game. He really seems to be a guy that consistently knows where he's supposed to be, when he's supposed to be there, and even when he's getting beat off the dribble, it's not because he's out of position; it's because that's just a better matchup for the opponent. But the passing, we heard about that, but to see it up close and personal, he's a better passer than I thought. That's the one part of his game that I think it actually works to a level where you can envision him seeing spot duty from time to time and having the role of just simply being a threat to shoot the ball, but knowing he's probably looking to pass it. And that's a great, but for him, the one thing that I still don't feel great about is his defense. And I don't know if that's going to get better over time. Because folks, I think forget that Sam Hauser wasn't exactly, a lockdown defender when he first came to the league, and he's not exactly a lockdown defender now, but he's become functional at that end of the floor to where when he's on the floor, he's not a liability. And I don't think Baylor's quite at that level defensively. He's a liability now, but because he has such a great feel for the game, because he seems to be, again, always in the right place at the right time, he's going to get better in that regard. And I think he will be someone sooner rather than later who'll find a way to get on the floor and not be a liability for this team.
Yeah, and I talked to someone who's been watching him here with the league. They point out his rebounding. Like, that's the thing, too, with him. He has a nose for the ball. He can track it down. I went back and watched that play where he flipped into the stands, the Lakers, and he came a long way, tipped it off the rim, and then chased it down and saved it going out of bounds there. And he's not the fastest guy. You see him lagging a little bit on there, but it's just kind of the anticipation he had for the ball in that moment. So when he's struggling, I think he missed a couple shots early in this game, got a couple steals. He'll go and grab those boards. And then, like you said, the passing is really something to see.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Sherrod. I think that, when you see you seeing the film is one thing, but actually being in person and being a few feet away from it, his passing is super impressive. Like it stood out from all the players that we've watched so far on the Celtics and other games. Like he clearly has a knack for it. And so I was thinking it's kind of funny. I feel like Baylor is so offensively ready and Anton is defensively ready. If you could just merge them, you'd probably have
a first-round pick.
Yeah, exactly. You'd have a really good NBA player. So I think they both showed flashes of things, and I think with Baylor's game, I like that he, even when he was like 1 for 7, I think at one point, it didn't really seem to impact the way that he was playing. And he, I think he's an older player and maybe that's a reflection of it, but you can see the contrast. Like Summer League, a lot of guys are missing shots. They're visibly frustrated. They're not kind of locked in on other ends. They're not getting, you see the kind of the spillover effect. And I feel like with him, he remained in it and he hit a big one down the stretch. And but he was just making the right plays kind of throughout the night. I really like what we've seen from him so far through 3 games.
I want to get on to some of the other Celtics here, of course. Shout out to our sponsor. A big reason we're out here in Vegas and able to cover the Celtics like we do. Our amazing sponsors like Game Time. And I use Game Time again, Sherrod, to go over the Aces game. Found some good deals on there. And that's what makes it great. You get all the leagues here. You get all the concerts, events that you're looking for. And it's an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball games going on all summer in MLB. They got the All-Star break going right now, but they'll be back at it this weekend, and they make buying tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app usually go down the closer it gets to first pitch, which is great. Sometimes you're not ready to go to the game. You don't know if you're going to go. And then finally you see a last-minute deal on Game Time, and you just snag it. And I've done that a million times over the years on Game Time. There's flash deals as well as zone deals. You can choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats for you. And there's just a bunch of great features in there. My favorite is the seat view. You actually see where you're going to be sitting before you get there, which is crucial because you don't want to end up in an obstructed view, especially in baseball with some of these weird parks like Fenway. So all that and more over at Game Time. Download it, create an account. CLNS for $20 off your first purchase over there. Terms apply. Again, create an account over on the Game Time app and redeem code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase over there. Last minute deals, lowest price, guaranteed. That's Game Time. We'll go with two guys who are going in different directions right now this summer. It looks like Sherrod, J.D. Davison, encouraging. I like the shot making. The defense has been solid. And overall, a lot more decisive with the ball in his hands here. Not as many turnovers, too. That was a big issue for him last summer. Jordan Walsh, however, 0 for 5 in this game. Still struggling to figure out where he fits in this offense. And maybe some of it's just the way this team is constructed. But those two couldn't be going in more opposite directions this summer.
Yeah, and the thing about Jordan, I'll start with him. I think a lot of what you're seeing offensively are the shots he ideally wants to take. But what we're seeing happen is that when a couple of those don't go in, it feels as though he starts to force the action, that he's trying so hard to make the right basketball basket as opposed to making the right basketball play. And that's something that I think, once he leaves this environment and gets back with the guys, I think he'll gradually kind of immerse himself in the reality that I'm a role player and I need to be able to make open shots, because when I'm playing with a Tatum, a Brown, Al Horford, Porzingis, you go down the line, they're going to leave me open. And he has to develop muscle memory to knock down those shots. And this has not been a great camp for him, where JD just the opposite of that. His shot making has been surprisingly consistent. It's been the one thing about him that I've been most shocked about. The one I have with his game still is that he has usually 2 or 3 possessions almost every game where he'll just dribble the hell out of the shot clock, where he will just dribble. He'll look someone off. He'll look someone else off. And
You're in Maine too.
And then you look up and there's like 6 seconds on the shot clock. And it's like, dude, what are you doing? That is something he has to get better. That's part of game management. That's one of those things where, as a coach, that reluctant to put him in the game than if he was missing shots. Because at least if he's missing shots, you know that once it's gone, there's a chance he can go in. But when you're killing the shot clock, you're making it so much harder for your offense to be efficient and be effective and be impactful. So that's the one thing that he has to figure out how to be better at managing the game clock when he's out there.
How about JD? I like what I see here. I was kind of surprised he was back with the Celtics when Brad made that, wanting him back in the fold here. And JD's obviously told us he didn't even look anywhere else. He just wanted to be back with this team after the championship there. And he's taken advantage of the opportunity this summer so far, I feel like. And as Sherrod was talking about with Jordan, doesn't really feel like he knows where he fits in this offense consistently right now. Davison's got the ball handling skills where he can just get inside and fire it out quickly. And I was telling you during the game, like the assists just sort of put themselves on the sheet with him. Like he just racks them up in a hurry. And so far, he looks like a confident player. He looks like a guy who's grown over the last year compared to what we saw from him here a year ago.
Yeah, I think the tough thing is just this situation in Boston there's not really a clear path here for him to get a roster spot or minutes. And, that's what you want for a guy that's, on his third two-way. I learned today, actually, he's the first player in NBA history to be on 3 two-ways with his So, he's in a unique situation here where he's done everything they've asked of him. He's consistently gotten better. I remember watching him last Summer League, and I feel like he was almost not to Jordan's level. I think Jordan's having a rougher go, but it was that same feeling of like you were hoping that he was going to make the leap, and then instead it was kind of just the other direction of like, oh shoot, like he's really making bad decisions. He doesn't seem to be super confident, kind of comfortable leading the team. And the guy that we're seeing now seems way more advanced in his game than he did last summer, which is, I think, a testament to him. And it's also, I don't think this is an outlier week here, because I watched him a lot in Maine, and that's the player that we saw all year. He was one of the best players in the G League. And so, I think that he's doing all the right things. I'm just looking at the Celtics roster, and it's like, where do you where do you see him fit in? If Peyton Pritchard gets hurt or something like that, then maybe he comes in as an insurance point guard. But even so, that I could see him playing real minutes. Like, my hope for him is that he, at least if he's on a two-way, that he's actually coming down to Boston at points, because he's been on a two-way for 2 years now, where he's pretty much in Maine all year, and then he comes down for the playoffs. So yeah, but I think on the Jordan front, the one thing I was going to say is, obviously we don't know exactly what's going on in his head, but it does seem like he had this idea for Summer League for himself, like a vision that he was going to go off and he was going to score a bunch and going to be like the main Celtics Jordan Walsh, where he was pretty much playing a 3-and-D role. And I think he was excited to lean into that, and it just hasn't been going well. And it's probably the mental frustration around that has been piling up, because he said it at the first practice. Remember, he said, like, I get to go get in my bag a little bit here because I'm not playing with Tatum and Brown. And I think it kind of went in the wrong direction of, like, maybe pressing or feeling like he has to score a lot, where he could score 8 points every night and it would be fine, everything else. And I feel like he's kind of gone in the wrong direction there a bit.
Yeah, and they're pretty comparable, right? They both went to college for a year. They both didn't play great in college. They both made that NBA leap anyway out of the SEC there, and had to go in Maine right away. And the good thing is, Sherrod, they don't need these guys right now. As long as they're patient, let's say Pritchard moves on in a year or two, or you lose Springer here and someone has to fill that depth reserve role. Obviously we'll get to Brad's comments, but it looks like O'Shea and Svi could be moving on this offseason. So as the roster starts to, with the new rules and the money and everything else, grow a little less deep, fortunately you have these guys who by that point will have filled 2-3 years in the G League, gotten to 21, 22 years old. Maybe at that point, they're those reserve guards and forwards, respectively, for Jason Tatum. But they have to be patient. I feel like JD has gotten in that mindset. Jordan's still trying to get there.
Yeah, I've just been really surprised at JD's patience, to be honest with you, because, people forget this was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school, one of the best players nationally. And when you have that type of status, you expect everything to happen yesterday. Not today, but yesterday, so that today you're thinking about tomorrow. And it hasn't worked out from that way. College after 1 year, and he didn't have a great year, which was a little bit surprising that he left when he did. Celtics were able to get him late in the second round, and he has, I think, gotten better from that point to now, but he hasn't made the progress that I think forces them to contemplate, maybe we need to get him into the regular 12-man grouping, because there was a gap that existed in Pritchard, and I just don't see that gap closing. If anything, it's getting wider, because Peyton has shown the ability to be a really, really good player in clutch moments. Mr. Half-court shot, my goodness. And JD is better, but not significantly to where there's this potential tension or competition between the two. And he's still embracing the fact that he's growing as a player. Which is good to see, because I do think that he can be a very good player in this league. It's just going to take some time.
Can you imagine Pritchard in Summer League? Like Pritchard of right now playing in this competition? Like, I feel like he would be so dominant in the, that just
at least 40.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that gap that you mentioned. It's a good point. Like, as much as JD is improving, so is Peyton Pritchard, and I do think, there's not really an opportunity there.
I just remember the last time that our good friend Peyton Pritchard, Summer League, he left early to play in a pro-am where he dropped in 80.
That's what it was. I was trying to remember where he went.
Yeah, pro-am Peyton was incredibly good. Summer League Peyton, not quite that guy. But again, Peyton is another example of what happens when you're patient, when you develop, when you just you don't get caught up in where you are, but your focus is on what do I need to get further along. And JD seems to that process. The fact that he's willing to take another two-way, that really speaks to just his willingness to want to develop and continue to grow within this organization.
A couple other notes here. Jamesh Ramsey had 15. Shared the scoring lead with Anton Watson in this one. You saw debuts from Tristan and Aruna, as well as Jaylen House. Tyler Cook had a couple big plays in this game as well, who went to high school with Tatum, playing on this roster. Killian Tilly started at center, hit a couple threes. So a lot of contributions in this one. A pretty good comeback win for the Celtics here without their 3 big contributors out here. And it was a pretty good Hornets team on the other side, too. So the Celtics moved to 2-1 in Summer League play. They're going to play the Mavs to wrap up their regular season slate of games here. There'll be a 5th game as well later in the week. And the other big news here, we got to talk to Brad Stevens, us 3, and who's here as well. And he had some interesting comments. We'll start with I thought, most newsworthy one he said, which to me said that O'Shea Brissett, Svi Mihailuk, those guys are probably going to be moving on here. Here's what he had to say about that 15th roster spot, which is pretty much all the Celtics have left to decide on before the season starts.
Yeah, Jaylen's a great player. Jaylen, I don't think there's any doubt that Jaylen could be on any team, could be on any Olympic team in any year, right? And but at the end of the day, I think his approach, and he talked about how he called Derrick. He talked about his own feelings from it. But I know this about Jaylen: whether he has success and gets all the accolades like Finals MVP or Eastern Conference Finals MVP, or if he feels like he got left off the team, I know he's going to be motivated and hungry regardless. That's what I've always loved about him. He always comes back to work.
Well, that was Brad talking about Jaylen. We don't have the O'Shea clip available right away, but that was the gist on O'Shea. We'll react to his comments on Jaylen there. I don't think the Celtics were thrilled about how that went, but right there, I think you heard satisfied with how Jaylen reacted once we talked to him, which was, I've talked to Derrick, we're good, I'm happy for those guys. I have my own frustrations with the process and with Nike and all of that, but I said it to Noah a couple of days ago when we talked to him, Sherrod. I think he put out all the fires that were blazing there after it happened, and I don't see this being going forward there, but again, as we've talked about for weeks now, it was a weird moment for him.
It was weird, and a lot of the fires that he put out were fires he started.
Yep.
So you should put out the fires if you start the fires. Jaylen did, I think, a good job of eventually explaining what I think a lot of us were feeling. That, yeah, maybe you were snubbed. You have a legitimate argument, especially, you're talking about, NBA Finals MVP, Eastern Conference Finals MVP. Just a couple weeks ago, you were the highest paid player in the NBA, only to be surpassed by your teammate, Tatum. And all that going on, and you're not on the Olympic team. But the issue that I had, and I think most people had, was you couldn't publicly say or express your happiness for Derrick. And that bothered me. Derrick deserved this. Derrick was exactly what that particular team needs. You need a guy who can step on the floor and kind of be a sort of kind of glue guy. He doesn't really have to score, but has the ability to do. Doesn't have to be your best defender, but can be that. Can do all those little things that championship caliber teams, even at the Olympic level, do. It reminded me of years ago when Tayshaun Prince was in Detroit and he was on the Olympic team. Tayshaun Prince was not the best player on that, but there was this guy named Kobe Bryant that Tayshaun used to defend really well, and it came up all the time. And when you look at the versatility that you're going to face defensively, when you're playing against the world stage, you need a guy who has the ability to defend a multitude of positions. That sounds kind of like Derrick White. And that's no knock against Jaylen, but there's a certain level where you have to go with fit or player available. And I think Team USA, they've got a lot of the best players available, but they needed someone who's the best fit. And Derrick, I think, is a better fit. That being said, Jaylen has every reason to be grumbled, but don't take out your disappointment and your frustration on the rest of the world and not acknowledge the fact that was your teammate who got this spot. This wasn't Jalen Brunson. This wasn't, Julius Randle or, a guy that you're better than. This was your teammate. You should be happy for him. And the fact that he didn't express it early on, he eventually did, but he didn't early on. That's what bugged me the most.
And he had to put out another fire the next day with Bronny. with his comments on Bronny.
The Bronny one, I feel like he should have just covered his mouth, but that wasn't intentional. Like, the tweets were like he sat there multiple times over 2 days. Also, it wasn't just that one tweet; it was like a series. And the more I thought about this, I think I was like, what really bothered me is that I've since seen a lot of clips of Derrick White like playing with the Olympic team, and all the replies are like, Jaylen Brown should be there. Jaylen Brown should be there. Like, take him out. Like, he should not be in the Olympic team. And I think there would have been a little bit of that regardless, because Derrick White's not an all-star. But I do think that it kind of does. It kind of sucks to see that, like, now there's this feeling that might linger throughout the Olympics, and hopefully. I don't think it's fair to Derrick now that, like, all the shine that should have been on his selection to the Olympic team is, like, there is this feeling still. And I don't know that will go away, even though I think the comments the other day obviously will help and as time passes too. But I feel like we were talking about this the other night, and then I went through like on Twitter, and Twitter doesn't represent everything, but you don't want to see that. You don't want to see like Derrick not being able to kind of cherish and enjoy this moment or by this moment. And I don't know how impacted he was. I think he does a good job of tuning stuff out, but I'm with you on that, on just the regardless of kind of how this played out, it was an unfortunate situation.
Yeah, Derrick this is a guy who has chipped teeth, busted head. I mean, he literally gives everything he has when he's on the floor, and he is paid a cost. He's paid a price for that.
Never misses games.
Doesn't miss games. And whether he takes 2 shots or you didn't even take 22 shots, he's going to be good if the team wins.
He took 1 shot today in 9 minutes for USA.
And Derrick is probably the happiest guy in the locker room afterward. And you need to have at least 1 or 2 guys like that on your team. You don't want to have a team full of those guys because that's a problem. But to have 1 or 2 guys where they're just instinctual responses, whatever you need, I'm going to provide. And I know what that is. And Jaylen, if we're being honest and real, Jaylen is going to be looking to score because that's what he does really well. But they don't need another guy to score. Now, if Kevin Durant all of a sudden decided that he wasn't going to play and he was out, then yeah, if that spot would have been open, then yeah, I would have absolutely expected him to pick Jaylen because Jaylen is a closer deliverer of what Kevin Durant does than Derrick White. But, you're losing a guy that, again, it created a void where you clearly needed someone who could just be glue, someone who can just bring everyone together. Mr. Kumbaya is what I like when I think of Derrick White. He's a better fit for this particular team than Jaylen would have been.
I also get the sense that, I feel like the Olympic team, I get the sense that they wanted Derrick on this roster from the jump, and they were almost like waiting for an opportunity for that. It feels to me like the relationships and the ties and whatnot, that he kind of knew this was going to happen if anybody went down. That was my impression from talking to his dad. And then the other thing is that I feel like we kind of look what's been lost in the discourse around Jaylen being left off this team is that this team was made way before the playoffs. And I do think that if we're assembling a team of 12 right now, he would have gotten one of those spots. And if he didn't, then there's larger conversations to be had. But 11 of those 12 spots before his playoff run, and I think his perception league-wide, worldwide really changed through that playoff
Will he be named if Durant is out, though?
Maybe not anymore, but I would think so. I mean, I think
That's
I'm
what
all
I'm
for him
interested
being
to
on
say.
the team. Like, I'm super high on Jaylen Brown, but I just think that like a lot of the discourse around like him versus Devin Booker and guys that I think he should have been over, like it was a different time. And those, now it's like, how could you leave the Finals MVP off? He wasn't off, so this was made before that. I feel like it's been missing a little bit.
The controversy continues because Lawrence Frank said it wasn't Kawhi's decision to back out here either. So I think there's some frustration on that side of things too. So we'll see how it plays out. Jaylen, of course, told us a couple of nights ago that he'll have more on his Nike accusation. I don't know if we'll hear it. Brad also commenting on the sale here. I know people aren't super interested in this, but said he was surprised as well, found out when everyone else did. And Adam Silver said today here too, he's saddened by Wyc Grousbeck moving on from the Celtics. So a lot of people bummed to see how this is going here, but understand the move. And no new information on who suitors could be or anything like that from Brad. But he said he doesn't expect it to impact his job at all as president of the team.
Well, I agree. I mean, it just doesn't make sense for anyone to come in and think, well, we got to do things differently. It's like, wait a minute, they just won a championship, and all the pieces that contributed to that significantly are back for at least a couple of years. What exactly are you trying to reinvent? Is it the only thing that any type of tinkering would be viewed as is if they're trying to save money? And you all have been in this market long enough to know that when you start doing that and the team doesn't quite win the way they are used to, you're going to be a hated owner. People are going to make it clear that this is not how this is supposed to work. So they've made it Wyc, by basically cutting checks to everyone, has made it easy for an owner to come in here and know that they have a high quality, extremely talented product. And, Brad Stevens, I think people forget that he's only been doing his GM thing for like a hot
3 years.
Yeah. And so in theory, he's going to get better as he continues to do this. And it's kind of scary to think that he's going to get better than what he's done. I mean, it took him, 3 years to be the GM and get a championship. It took Danny Ainge a little bit longer than that.
And he started from Ground zero effectively there with
Right.
the roster he had in place, and he
Right.
had to change everything.
He didn't have the benefit of being a former player and a former head coach. Yeah, he was a head coach with this particular team, but he didn't have that type of institutional knowledge that Danny Ainge had. And yet Brad still figured out how to make it work. This is one of the few things Joel Embiid and I are like on the same page with. The Drew Holiday deal, I'm still trying to wrap my arms around how Brad was able to pull that one off. Because of all the deals he did, that was the one I'm like, no way.
What did
No
Embiid
way.
say? He said, "I believe the Bucks let that happen," or
Yeah, and they were trying to save money, and Brad wisely jumped in, and I think it also helps that Brad, when he was a head coach, was very well liked and respected throughout the league, and so in this different role, I think there's almost like a little bit of, well, Brad's our guy, he's a good guy, and he's going to save us some money, so let's just make this deal happen. Whereas when Danny's trying to get deals done, they're like, where's my wallet? Because Danny's trying to pick my pocket. Because this is a guy that's going to be my third string center, and Danny wants 4 first-round picks for that. And I love that about Danny. But in terms of getting the major pieces that you need to get over the hump, I thought Brad just did a phenomenal job. I mean, he'll get better.
Yeah, one of the underrated moves you mentioned, saving the team some money, bringing in James, mentioned off the top. Only need one summer league game to show the Celtics that he doesn't need to be here or do anything more to go into his next season here.
He's
Yeah.
what, 21, I think now?
Yeah, he was like an 18-year-old coming out.
And he's going into year 4, I think, at this point. So, yeah.
Yeah, so that's all for Summer League. I'll throw the O'Shea thing at you because you asked the question, Noah. 15th roster spot.
We shouldn't answer the O'Shea question because we're Syracuse guys and we're.
Well, I'm a big viewer of his vlog, so I also have bias.
It
I want to keep
sounds.
seeing the behind-the-scenes content. So
It sounds like
doesn't sound
barring,
like we're gonna take it back.
barring the decision by him to come back and maybe take a backseat role again, which has been rumored. He's looking for more playing time here, and Brad pretty much said that here. And they're going to keep their options open, as he said, maybe for months, maybe into the season, as they did last year. Figure out what they're going to need as the injury and roster situation develops here.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting answer. I went back and rewatched it a couple of times. On one hand, he said, we know Porzingis is going to have a long recovery, and we might want to have, we got to look at the needs of our roster, which made me think they might not even be offering him that spot. Like they might be looking for a big or someone that can complement them on that, that aspect of the floor. And then on the other hand, he said we respect that he might want more minutes, though it's kind of more in his court. I mean, he obviously had that player option, so at one point he did have the option to come back, but he wasn't saying, like, you remember when he talked about J.D. Davison a couple weeks back, he said we'd really like to have him back. We hope to make it work. And then obviously that worked out. Like, he didn't put out a statement like, it's up to O'Shea at this point. I'm not even sure if he really has a spot based off what he said today. Maybe he does, but it was a little bit of a confusing statement. But if I had to bet, is O'Shea Brissett going to be back next year? Based off what we heard today, I would say no. It sounded like both him and Svi are headed elsewhere.
I think the door is open, Sherrod, but he's looking around.
I think the door is like barely open. It's not even really open. It's like if you really look close, it looks closed, but I think it's barely open. It should be. I think what's ultimately going to determine whether he comes back or not is, are there other dominoes in place currently that fall down or fall apart where you need to have another kind of hybrid wing / big. And I just don't think that's happening. I think that the way the Celtics have constructed this roster beyond, their core guys, it makes O'Shea kind of a luxury. And I think he's just too young, and I think he's too good a player to just be, your 14th man or someone who's on your active roster, but it's never going to play. Yeah. He understands that, as an NBA player, you have only a certain finite amount of time to earn money. And the second apron that we've talked about before, it has screwed so many non-superstar players. I mean, it's one of the reasons why, we haven't talked about him today, but Sam Hauser, who should in theory be a very, very rich man next summer. I'm not sure what happened in the second apron is why. Not the Celtics per se, but just teams so scared to come close to it. Which, again, for a guy like O'Shea, if the money is going to be pretty much the same, you might as well go somewhere where you're going to play. And you already have a championship, so that whole I need to win a ring, you've already got that. So now it's like, what can we do to get paid? I mean, I think one of the best examples of that is our good friend Whit Grousbeck. Hey, we got a championship. I got 2 chips. Now it's time to reap the rewards that comes with being a great team, great organization. So I wish O'Shea was back. I wish he was coming back, but I just don't see it.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens the rest of the way. Hauser extension eligible as well. We hit on that with Michael Scotto the other day here. Had some updates, some numbers tossed around on that. Feels like 10 is kind of the number that is a starting point. I'm sure Hauser is well above 10. And as you mentioned, maybe 10's a number they say if the second apron's killing teams and teams are hard capped. Maybe you take that now for some security and just not trying to do what Grant did, right? Which was bet on yourself, not play well, and not play consistently that next year, and have it hanging over your head.
Yeah, it's a hard one because I really want Sam to get paid. He's done the things that you love to see guys do. He comes into the league. He's supposedly a one-trick pony. He can only make threes. And then he starts showing that there's more to his game, that he's growing into being a more complete player. In the finals, he took some shots that I didn't even think were in the bag.
He was so good in the finals.
The pump fake, step in, baseline three-point shot. I mean, if he starts making that shot consistently, he became a defensive nightmare because now you got to worry about a guy who can knock down threes and knock down mid-range twos. And his defense, I think, is solid. He doesn't kill you, as we talked about earlier. He's not a defensive liability when he's out there. I mean, he did as good a job as anyone on Luka in the finals, which is saying a lot because Luka is a handful. But the economics of the NBA are going to, unfortunately, have some, to me, collateral damage victims. And I think O'Shea, I think Sam may be one next year because teams just aren't going to be comfortable going so deep into the luxury tax and having potential of having their picks, move to the end of the first round and just having all these different mechanisms that come into place once you start swinging in that second apron zone. The Celtics don't care about that because they're the champs. And they brought everyone back. They brought the entire band back together. And the cool thing about their team is that other than Al Horford, no one is really nearing the end of the road. And that's, to me, the scary part about them. That's why they're more built to be a dynasty-type team than anyone else because their core is relatively young, and they're signed for multiple years, and they, knock on wood, they've been pretty drama-free. Probably the biggest drama they've had all 2024 was Jaylen Brown after the championship. So they're in great shape, and I just, I hate the idea that O'Shea's not going to be here because I love Orange. But I also love for guys to be in places and spaces that understand and appreciate what value they bring to the game. And he's going to find that. It's just not going to be in Boston.
Well, Brad does love extensions. So if Hauser gets one, I don't think anyone will be surprised at this point. Yeah.
It's going to be a great deal for them if he does an extension.
Well, obviously, you can check out Brad Stevens' comments on our YouTube channel here. DJ McClay, Anton Watson, and Jalen House all talked after the game as well. So go over there and see what they had to say about a pretty good win for the Celtics here today. So some mixed results in terms of the guys you're looking at to perform here at Summer League, but they'll have 2 more chances. We'll see who continues to play after this. But Friday, 4:30 is the next one. Mavs Celtics finals rematch. Not many in the finals will be playing for that one, but Sherrod, Noah, they are going to have it all covered here, and I'll be hosting remote. I'll be back on Postgame. I will not be here in Vegas, so I'm done, guys. I've gotten all I need to out of this one. You can hear it in my voice. It's been hot, and I am suffering from it, but luckily we got the hat, Sherrod. This is why
Bobby is still in the building.
This is why you buy these for the summertime, guys. So go check those out. CLNSmedia.com as well. There's our great sponsor, Game Time. Use the code CLNS over there to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And that's it for us here. Celtics beat the Hornets, moved to 2-1 in Summer League play for Sherrod Blakely. For Noah Dalzell, I'm Bobby Manning. This has been the Garden Report.
Wait, Amit's got an outro for us, I think.
No, he doesn't.
He said he was going to work on an outro.
He had a phenomenal game.
Phenomenal game.
Forfeit's out. I think it's an option. That did not sound like a chair.
It was a freaking chair. It does sound like a chair.